So the impact of Lineage AI on software maintenance is about 40 to 50% savings in your software maintenance cost. So this is a very complicated issue. The good thing is now we are starting to have solutions that make it easier for enterprises to keep their software up to date and mitigate this very complicated, what versions do you upgrade to, and so on and so forth.
Hi, this is your host Abdul Bhartia and welcome to TFR Let's Talk. Today we have with us Javed Hasan, CEO and co-founder of Lineage. Javed, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Swapnil.
It's my pleasure to host you here. Of course, we cover Lineage on regular basis, but today you are here on the show. So I'm a little bit tempted to know the history and story of the company, what problem you saw in the space, because sometimes we see the security is kind of a solved problem, open source is a solved problem, that you saw that these problems not solved, which led to the co-foundation of Lineage. So talk about the story.
Yeah, so let's start with the name because the name sort of illustrates what we do. So the name of the company, as you know, is Lineage. So Lineage is about the lineage of software. We basically try to find out where does software come from. And so why is that an unsolved problem? Let's start there, right? So today, what happens is when software developers build software, they assemble it as much as they code it. So in fact, 70 to 80% of all software is now sourced from outside the company. And of course, it comes from open source as well as third-party components that make up that software. And so and each one of the layers that if a developer puts in an open source component, that itself is not built by the developers of that package. In fact, open source developers also source components from others, so forth. So essentially, the modern software is built of a software supply chain that may be 20 to 30 levels deep. And today, almost all software that ships, we don't necessarily know all the components that make up that software. And what that then creates is a situation where if I can tamper or a piece of software 25 levels deep, most software analysis tools cannot see that. And if you can't see it, you can't detect that tamper. And if you can't detect that tamper, well, you will get breached. And so that's why we have seen a significant rise in what we call software supply chain attacks, where a component is tampered upstream, goes downstream through a software developer or development house to customers, and customers get breached. So we effectively Lineage provides solution software supply chain software for software we source, software we build, software we sell, and software we buy. We can give the full lineage and the inherent risk in all of that software.
We have started talking a lot about software supply chain, even if I'm not wrong, a few years ago. Biden administration, they came up, also executive order regarding S-bombs. You folks also do some work, in that space. What kind of awareness are you seeing when you talk to your customers where they do know the risks of software supply chain, or they're like, it's open source is secure by design, we don't need to worry about security? Or you feel that, no, there's enough awareness, everybody knows it, what they're asking is about solutions?
So a set of questions in that, right? So let's start with the awareness level. So I think the Executive Order 14028 issued by the White House under President Biden has been really key in raising awareness of the issue. And fundamentally, what it says is the federal government will no longer buy software if they don't know what's inside it. So they asked software developers to attest all the components of their software that they are shipping as part of it. And as you know, in the modern software, like there are Docker containers, they're containers and there are other things. Now, the problem is that, as you said, there is a perception that open source is very secure. But what we are seeing is, for example, open source developers are amazing innovators, but terrible maintainers of software. Right? So what we are seeing is that about 52% of all vulnerabilities in open source are never fixed. And in general, the security controls as open source software is developed are relatively lax because you have people, contributing to it globally. And so, for example, for example, Lineage can track what part of the software components were written in China, what was written in Russia, what was written in India, what was written in the US, and you start thinking, and what was written by people that who did not reveal who they were. We can still decipher their location, but we don't know who they were, right? So open source can come with a significant amount of risk if unmanaged and unfiltered, right? So now if you start thinking of the whole thing, what we have is if 70 to 80% of the software is built out of open source, and much of it is opaque and unknown, right? And not as well maintained as traditional software, your risk suddenly goes up. And over the last 10 years, the amount of open source used in applications has actually gone up dramatically. When I started my career, we used no real open source. And now today, 80% of the application is open source, right? Now, at the same time, what you're seeing is that when customers get breached, sometimes it is because the software they deployed had weaknesses. And if you don't know what's inside the piece of software, you can't actually put compensating controls in your environment. So even if the software you buy, there's no guarantee that it's built secure. So then how do you secure that, right? So fundamentally that awareness has been going up as supply chain attacks have been going up. The second thing that is, the security needs is compliance mandates. A lot of security is sold because the government has a compliance mandate that if you want to do something with the government, you need to hit a certain standard. So what Executive Order 14028 did for us was two things. One is it raised awareness, and we are seeing a high increase in awareness, especially in high regulatory environments. So public sector, defense, healthcare, financials, automotive. And then what we are seeing is a compliance mandate, which then makes companies say, well, look, if I don't actually do it, I will not be able to sell my software to let's say, the federal government. And last point there, Swapnil, is that we are seeing the same path happening globally. So we are seeing mandates going through in EU. We are seeing mandates go through in the UK. Japan is moving down that path. Middle East is going down that path. Singapore is going down that path. So the general awareness that not knowing what's in the software you build, buy, or use is detrimental to the usage of that software and the risk it poses. And hence every country is going down that path.
If you look at the world today, which is all software driven, what kind of challenges you see in order to secure either the devices or the workloads or the environments?
It's a great question, right? So if you start thinking about patches being available, so like if you let's just focus on open source for a minute. Log4j was a big one, right? With big vulnerability. The good thing was fixes were available almost immediately. And to your point, what we have seen is, few years have passed, but you still have unpatched log4j all over the place. So why is that the case, right? That's the case simply because if you were to apply that patch and your software is complicated, you may break your software. So what happens is software maintenance becomes a huge task because when you apply patches, it's the argument, and if that particular component is a deep dependency, but you picked up a top level package that used that dependency, applying that patch has unknown impacts on the package you picked up because it's 3 levels deep or 7 levels deep, and it may break the package, right? So, and ultimately, it goes back to the top level package that you picked up, applying the patch. And like we said earlier, that open source developers are great innovators and not that good at maintenance. So they may or may not have applied that patch, right? And you can't and you as a consumer of the top level package, if you apply the patch, then you own the retesting or the recertification of the package of your dependency, and that's hard and that's very expensive. And in general, what we find is that in most organizations they will support 5 or 6 languages through their developers, right? For that their developers understand. When you start ingesting open source dependencies, you are now sitting with 100 plus languages that are essentially being dragged in. So the ability for your developers to actually understand the code of your dependencies is by and large non-existent, right? Nor do companies fund for that. So where you end up with all of this is that applying patches is also a significant expense. Frequently, it will break the software. Now, so that we see that. So one of the big things that Lineage does, coming back to Lineage a little bit, is that we can detect whether a patch that you're applying or open source version that you're upgrading to will break the rest of your software, or is it compatible. So we have invested in something we call Lineage AI. And what Lineage AI can do is look at the full list of components, the full SBOM that we started with, and let's say that has 1,000 components. You want to upgrade component A, which is 20 levels deep, from version 1 to version 2, because that fixes that vulnerability. We will tell you whether it will break your software, and if so, which components, or which version to go to. Don't go to version 2 because it's incompatible with the rest of your software, but just go to version 1.1, which also fixes the vulnerability. May not be the latest one, but is compatible with the rest of the software. So the impact of Lineage AI on software maintenance is about 40 to 50% savings in your software maintenance cost. So this is a very complicated issue. The good thing is now we are starting to have solutions that make it easier for enterprises to keep their software up to date and mitigate this very complicated, what versions do you upgrade to, and so on and so forth.
When it comes to security, it used to be an afterthought. It used to be someone else's problem, but now it is becoming a kind of C-level, board-level discussion with CISOs. How are you seeing organizations are looking at security? Is it all is still part of a specific silo within, or it's a industry or company wide? Because when things happen, once again, I don't want to name any company. Security does not just affect your user; it can tarnish your brand, and it takes a lot of time to recover from that image, damage. So, talk about overall how you're seeing security where it is.
I think security has come a long way. It has become a much more important issue than it used to be. We clearly wish it was a higher, a more important than it is. And right, having said that, one of the interesting thing that Executive Order 14028 did in that angle is that the assertion that your software is made up of components A, B, C, assertion of the SBOM, has to be signed by the CEO or one of their directs. So what you're starting to see are compliance mandates that actually demand that C-level execs actually put their name on the attestation letter for their software, which I think is a big deal. And what that does is, if you're going to start putting your name on it, then you want to be more careful than if someone else was putting their name on it. So we are seeing the rise of the importance of security, and I think mandates like that help. Now, having said that, we are also dealing with a very, very complicated world of software development, software distribution, so on and so forth. And software typically will go through multiple chains. So it's a complicated problem. And many C-level execs are uh, just cannot deal with that complexity. So where this goes is they also need better tools than are available in the cybersecurity world that will give them a visibility into what are the risks that their software creates for their own company as well as for their customers. And you're right, the business impact of a mistake there, or of a breach there, are very significant to the brand. So increasingly security and brand are getting tied up more and more. I mean, we saw the recent CrowdStrike incident, right? And again, that's not a software supply chain issue, right? It's just an update issue, but it is a issue where software you bought uh, broke down the software you built. So if I was running a reservation system on a device, and that also had CrowdStrike now impacted Windows, which blue screened, and now my reservation system is no longer running. Right, so now we're also starting to see the very interconnectedness of the software we build, knowing what's inside it, to the software we buy and knowing what's inside it, and how when software we buy changes, it impacts the software we built. Right? So we are now starting to see a very connected, interconnected world where business is directly impacted by all aspects of software.
Of course, we have been talking about technology. Now let's talk about company a bit. When we look at the security space, security can, like data, become a sticky market. People don't, organizations don't change the security vendors. Once you go there, they stick to a vendor. Talk a bit about this market, especially in terms of software supply chain. And you folks also, congratulations on 20 million, as investment round. Talk about your own growth, your own evolution, where Lineage is powerful enough to actually handle all these complexities for their customers.
Let's start with the market, right, that we play in, and and why cybersecurity is much more dynamic than almost any other software market. So in most software markets, you actually have a seller of software and a user of software, right? You have a customer and you have a seller. In the security space, there's a third entity, which is a attacker. And it's the only market where the attacker or the third party actually has a more effect on what a customer needs to buy than the features that the customer may want. Because a new attack type changes the market. So what we are seeing is that supply chain attacks are changing the market. It's changing. So if you now step back and look at a second vector, that software we build, right? Software we use, in all cases, there has been a mindset in security that runtime security can protect software or digital infrastructure irrespective of how it has been built. And so if you looked at almost all the large companies, including CrowdStrike, Palo Alto, all of these companies, they focus by and large on securing software runtime environments, production environments, and essentially ignoring whether the software itself is built secure or not built secure. What supply chain attacks have shown is that you need to start paying attention to how software is built. If software is built insecurely and badly and is fundamentally tampered when it's built, there's nothing you can do after runtime to detect an attack, because the attack is inside the software you're protecting. So essentially, the protectee is attacking the protector, which is a supply chain attack, or bypassing the protector, which is the attack is coming from inside the software you're supposed to protect. And so we are not necessarily tuned in runtime to do it. So that's the fundamental opportunity that the company has, is to help secure how software is built and what its ingredients are. And if you sort of look at the broad market that we are after, about 1 trillion of software will be bought in 2024 by various companies. All of it, by and large, or 99% of it, we don't know what's inside it. We see that as an opportunity for Lineage, and this is why we built a product for software you buy. About the amount of open source that is used by enterprises is estimated by Harvard Business Review to be about 450 billion. The value it creates for the customers that use it is north of 8 trillion. So large markets, right? And so if your open source is insecure, which is the case, then that's a market. The value of open source software is estimated to be or the replacement value of that is about estimated to be 450 billion. Now Lineage helps manage your open source, right? Similarly, we help you manage the software you build, which again has not been quantified, but the value of the entire software that is built is very significant. So that's the play we have. And as we think of this funding round that we just raised, so software supply chain market till now very much is US centric, because President Biden started it with the Executive Order 14028. However, the implications are global. So if you are a company in Japan or in Middle East, you still need software supply chain software, right? Security. So one of the big things we did as part of this, we partnered with a number of international distribution companies. So we are partnered with Hitachi Ventures, which takes us into Japan, and all through the Hitachi consulting world into new markets to distribute our software. Wipro Ventures invested in the company. As you know, Wipro is a large, is one of the largest software developers in the world. So now we are working with Wipro to make sure that we can piggyback them into markets they are strong in, and also because they build such a lot of software, how do we contribute to help them build better software for their customers? And of course, it's both a go-to-market effort as well as to have a high impact on that. We have had a deep relationship with Persistent Systems for the last 1.5 years, and we are working with them to make sure that Persistent delivers better software, and of course, uh, fixes open source that they use and their customers use. Right? Uh, so I mean, this round is really all about how do we go to market. The biggest investor is Prosperity Seven. Prosperity Seven is an arm of Aramco, or the funding arm of Aramco. Aramco, as till lately was the largest company in the world. They that entry allows us to, of course, work with Aramco. Aramco owns hundreds of companies. We hope to extend our reach through Aramco to them, as well as entry into the Middle East market, where again we are seeing a high amount of concern around the software supply chain. So effectively, what we have done with this funding round is set the company up to expand globally. Now, to do that, we also have to build a sales and marketing team. So one of the big calls we made, we raised 20 million just now. We had raised a seed round of 7 million in late 2022. We made a call, which was that we will invest the 7 million in engineering effectively. So we did not, even though we have done well in the market, we actually had no sales and marketing resources in the company, which is very strange for a startup, but we decided to just do it that way. And now we feel like the products are ready. So let's go for expansion. So we're building. So one of the big investment, big uses of the money is to build a global sales and marketing engine. And the other part of this is to leverage these partnerships to expand rapidly.
These days, one of the hottest topic, now it depends on how one looks at it, is Gen AI or AI. AI, we have been using it for a long time now. We don't even talk about it. We still don't have Terminators walking on the street killing people, but Gen AI has kind of reignited the interest in AI. Now, when it comes to AI, or let's say Gen AI, we can look at it from two different lenses. One is that Gen AI itself is a workload that needs to be secured. Second is that Gen AI can help companies like Lineage to improve things there. So how do you look at, and if you can look at Gen AI or AI from these two different lenses?
You nailed it. There are these two lenses, and both are opportunities for us. So one is AI are workloads. You need to know the lineage of where does your AI come from. You need to know what are inherent risks in it. You need to know how it can be tampered, and was it built secure. So Lineage helps with that. And so, and the second part of it is AI increases our ability to fix software better, faster, to find issues better, faster, which is where our investment is in Lineage AI. And one of the big parts of this investment for us is how do you autonomously fix the supply chain using AI, right? And so if we talked about insecure open source, we talked about insecure private code. How we know what the issues are, having worked on it for 2 years, right? And then it is also clear that the size of the problem is humongous. So how can you now leverage AI to solve that humongous problem? So we're very excited. We have a path there. So that's a big investment for us as we go forward on the engineering side to build out capabilities for autonomously fixing issues that we find in the supply chain.
How different when we look at AI as a workload, let's say. It's not as easy as a lamp stack. There are four components. You look at it, we are talking about frameworks, we are talking models, we are talking about data. Also, data can also be, without data, AI is useless. That what kind of data you are plugging in, there should be there really. Does that look like even more complicated when you look at his workload? And if yes, what is Lineage doing to kind of secure those kind of workloads?
So it is more complicated, almost right. So you have code, you have models, you have data, training data. I mean, if you sort of look at how AI is built, and you have a CI/CD pipeline that is now updating the AI relatively quickly, right? And that is your competitive differentiation. Now, knowing all of that is being done securely, and starting with, do you actually know where did the AI model that you're using come from? Right now, think of, we spoke a little bit about the lineage of software. Now, we should expect that, especially in open source, but even in private companies, AI will be used to write more and more code. So today we can detect what code was written by an author from, by a contributor X from Russia and from China and for US and from India. Tomorrow, we need to detect what code was written by what AI model, where, when, right? Now, and that is part, and so that's a big investment for us right now to figure out how do you track code that was generated by AI, so that you can look at it and say, this is AI generated code and was, let's say, generated by Copilot, and this was generated by some other model. At some point, someone will compromise the model, and you will need to go back and find, where the lineage of all your code in terms of AI. So we see that as a significant problem. Lineage should be the first company to solve it. And as we look ahead, the other big part of this problem for us simply is, or for the industry simply is, you know, again, there are build time attacks and there are runtime attacks. So we'll not, of course, play in the runtime side. There are other people who will do that. But the build time attacks, we should be the first company to detect those as well.
Earlier we were talking about awareness, and now you're talking with this additional funding. You'll be focusing a lot of on marketing as well. Events play a very good role in not only visibility but also talking to folks, talking to the players in the ecosystem. Talk about your presence at all these events and what is your strategy going forward.
Clearly, events are important. They help us generate demand. I mean, one of the big feedbacks we've been hearing back from customers is that there's a lot of government mandates in supply chain. There also are a number of vendors who are selling solutions for that. What is lacking is enough industry guidance on what specifically to do and how to implement a good supply chain solution. So what we have decided to do, and you'll see that at Black Hat, and then at later events over and over again, is we have created something that we call the Software Supply Chain Summit. It's a very innovative name, right? And we have basically made that an industry event because we feel what the market needs right now from us and from other vendors is this whole education on what are the supply chain problems are from a implementation perspective. We know the mandates, we know the products, but how do you implement that? So we have industry experts talking about it and how they have solved those problems, and then providing guidance so that others can learn from that. So it becomes a place of ideas exchange where you have vendors, customers, and practitioners coming together and talking about how to solve this humongous software supply chain problem. So the first software supply chain summit is on August 6th at Black Hat at the Win. And of course, we will follow that with one a quarter.
Javed, thank you so much for joining me today and not only share the history and the story of the company, but also how you folks are solving very complicated, of course, supply chain security problem in the space. Thanks for great insights. And I'd love to have you folks back on the show. Thank you.
So thank you, Swapnil. It was a pleasure.